Imagine you are in a prison cell. You meet your new neighbor. He is a small man, short, black hair. He does not look dangerous. Then you learn his name, Ian McAteer, and you learn the truth. This small man is one of the most feared criminals in the entire United Kingdom. He is in for a brutal execution, a murder in Liverpool. How could this unassuming man be so dangerous? What was the truth about his feared reputation? And what really happened at the Liverpool Marina? Today's story reveals a dark path from the back streets of Glasgow to the marinas of Merseyside. Stay with us as we uncover the complete truth.
He was born Ian Douglas McAteer on November 12, 1961, in Dalmuir, a rough part of Clydebank, Glasgow. His life began in the shadow of post-industrial decay, in a world of decaying factories and desolate tenements that promised little to those born in its poorest corners. His childhood was fractured. He was one of 5 siblings, and their mother struggled with addiction and mental health issues, leaving the children to often fend for themselves. This instability led to a life in and out of foster care, and by the age of 11, Ian was already learning to survive on the streets, robbing purses and handbags to feed himself and his siblings. This life of petty crime was an apprenticeship. By 1979, the teenage McAteer began forging links with serious players in the Glasgow underworld. He was physically small, a trait that would later earn him the nickname Little Hands. He had short black hair and an unassuming appearance. To a stranger, he looked like nothing. To those who knew him, he was a man to be feared. He learned quickly that in his world, respect was not given, it was taken, and the most effective tool for taking it was a reputation for ruthless violence. Throughout the 1980s, McAteer's criminal enterprise expanded. He was a chameleon, able to navigate the complex social circles of the underworld. He became a key figure in the burgeoning heroin trade that was flooding the streets of Glasgow. But he did not stop there. His ambition pushed his operations into arms trafficking, debt collection, and running lucrative protection rackets. To clean his money, he operated a successful used car business. His influence soon crossed borders, as he built a profitable and powerful relationship with the Liverpool Mafia. His reputation grew with his business. He was no longer just a dealer, he was known as a hitman. In Glasgow, he was Little Hands, the quiet, dangerous operator. In Merseyside, his volatile nature earned him a different name, Mad Jock. By 1993, his name was prominent enough to attract serious attention from law enforcement. He was arrested in possession of a large consignment of recreational drugs. In a move of supreme arrogance, McAteer opted to represent himself at the High Court in Glasgow. The performance did not work. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His incarceration at His Majesty's Prison Glenachill was not a pause in his career, but a networking event. It was here that he met 2 men who would define his future. The first was Warren Selkirk, a drug dealer from Bootle in Merseyside. The second was John Jack Bennett, a fellow crime figure from the Barmalock area of Glasgow. McAteer and Bennett became associates, but the relationship soured. The reasons for the conflict are murky, rooted in the violent and secretive codes of prison life. Bennett's family would later claim the rift began when John rejected McAteer's advances. Whatever the cause, the animosity became lethal. Prosecutors would later allege that McAteer put out a contract on Bennett from inside the prison, offering 2 ounces of tobacco and 50 temazepam tablets to any inmate who would kill him. The contract went unfulfilled. On February 28, 1998, both Ian McAteer and John Bennett were released from prison. For Bennett, his freedom lasted only a few hours. That same day, he was set upon in a brutal, daylight attack on Royston Road in Glasgow. Shoppers ran screaming as 3 men cornered Bennett and attacked him with ferocious precision. He was stabbed 57 times. The police arrested McAteer and 2 other men, Robert Burke and Donald MacPhail. The trial began on August 10, 1998. The prosecution's star witness was John Bennett's 27-year-old partner. She was a protected witness, but she bravely took the stand and testified that she personally saw McAteer, Burke, and MacPhail kill her partner. The defense, however, tore into the inconsistencies of a chaotic, fast-moving, and traumatic event. The jury deliberated and returned with one of the most frustrating verdicts in the Scottish legal system. Not proven. It was not innocent, but it was not guilty. It meant the 3 men were free to go. Ian McAteer, a man already feared throughout the underworld, had faced an eyewitness in a murder trial and walked away clean. He seemed untouchable. Later that same year, he was arrested again, this time in Merseyside, on suspicion of shooting another man at a set of traffic lights in Glasgow, mere yards from where John Bennett had been killed. But the case collapsed when the victim, understanding the reputation of the man he was accusing, refused to make a formal complaint. In 1999, his name was even floated as a person of interest in the high-profile murder of English television presenter Jill Dando, though no charges were ever brought. Ian McAteer was a ghost, and the bodies were piling up. But his downfall was already in motion. His legitimate-seeming businesses and nomadic lifestyle, with homes in Maryhill, Drumchapel, and even Leicester, were a cover for a massive drug operation. The National Crime Squad, or NCS, had its sights on him. They had initiated a year-long surveillance operation codenamed Operation Kingsway, focused on the drug trafficking lines between Merseyside and Glasgow. The operation centered on McAteer and his key associate in Liverpool, a man named Anthony Parkinson. While the police were watching, McAteer's business was hitting a snag. The snag was Warren Selkirk, the 33-year-old dealer from Bootle whom McAteer had met in prison. Selkirk, now a father of 3, was working for McAteer as a drug courier. But he had a problem. He was a massive gambler, running up debts cited to be as low as $6,000 or as high as $40,000. He was becoming a liability, and in McAteer's world, liabilities were eliminated. On the night of October 30th, 1999, McAteer lured Selkirk to a meeting at Crosby Marina, a dark, isolated beauty spot in North Merseyside. Warren Selkirk drove there, but he did not go alone. In his car, just yards away from the meeting point, he left his own children. They waited in the car for their father to finish his business. They waited in vain. Warren Selkirk never returned. McAteer met him and, in a cold-blooded execution, shot him 5 times at point-blank range with a small .25 caliber handgun. 4 shots were to the head, 1 was to the chest. This was not just a murder, it was a statement. When Selkirk's body was discovered the next morning by a couple walking their dogs, police found a plastic bag clutched in his right hand. It was filled with dog excrement. It was a final, degrading message of contempt from the killer. The murder investigation was headed by Detective Superintendent Julianne Wallace-Jones. The pressure was immense, but the NCS's Operation Kingsway had already provided the key. They had been tracking McAteer's movements, and his mobile phone records definitively placed him on a journey from Glasgow to Liverpool on the day of the murder, and near Crosby Marina at the time it happened. Armed police moved in and arrested McAteer. McAteer, sensing the trap closing, immediately began to plot his way out. He orchestrated 2 distinct plans. The first was a campaign of intimidation. He let it be known that he would shoot any police officer or witness who dared to testify against him. The threats were so credible that at least 2 underworld witnesses were permanently moved into witness protection programs in exchange for their testimony. His second plan was a bizarre red herring. Suddenly, an Irish terrorist group calling itself the Loyalist Freedom Fighters claimed responsibility for Selkirk's murder. They even sent a photograph of men in balaclavas to an Irish newspaper. But police quickly identified this as a fabrication, a desperate piece of street theatre orchestrated by McAteer himself to muddy the waters. Simultaneously, he tasked his associate, a South Liverpool drug dealer named David Baker, with creating a false alibi. Baker approached a small-time crook and offered him money to go to the police with a fabricated story. The story was that the crook had met with McAteer on the night of October 30th to discuss buying a car. But the plan backfired. The small-time crook, terrified of being embroiled in a high-profile execution, went straight to the police and told them everything. In February 2000, the NCS net finally closed. McAteer, Anthony Parkinson, and 7 other members of their conspiracy were formally remanded in custody on drug charges, with the murder charge hanging over McAteer's head. Around this time, in 2001, a podcast host recalled being in a prison cell next to McAteer. The host, a young man in his 20s, was intimidated. He remembered the rumor going around the prison was that the evidence against McAteer was a drop of blood from the victim found on his shoe. In March 2001, the 19-day trial began at Liverpool Crown Court. The prosecutor, David Turner, QC, laid out the case before the judge, Mr. Justice Grigson. The evidence was overwhelming. The mobile phone tracking, the failed alibi, the witness testimony. McAteer, now 39, took the stand in his own defense. He claimed he was not a drug dealer. He insisted he was only in Merseyside that night to visit one of his many girlfriends. He tried to deflect, blaming the entire setup on another associate, Paul Bennett, no relation to John. A second man charged with the murder, James O'Neill, was exonerated due to lack of evidence. On April 5, 2001, the jury returned its verdict. Ian McAteer was found guilty of murder, guilty of conspiracy to supply heroin and ecstasy, and guilty of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Before passing sentence, Mr. Justice Grigson looked at McAteer and said, "It is plain this was a cold-blooded execution, and the execution of a man who trusted you. This sentence is mandatory. You will go to prison for life." For the murder, he was given a life sentence. For the attempt to pervert the course of justice, he was given a concurrent 5-year term. His co-conspirator, David Baker, later received a 4-year sentence for his role in the alibi plot. 6 months after his murder conviction, McAteer was back in court and given an additional 16-year sentence for the massive drug conspiracy. The conviction sent a wave of relief through law enforcement in 2 countries. Detective Superintendent Wallace Jones told the press, "Ian McAteer is extremely dangerous. If he had not been convicted, I have no doubt that he would have become a hitman." A senior detective at the Strathclyde Constabulary in Scotland was even more blunt, telling a reporter, "He is a vicious, evil man. We were delighted when we heard that Merseyside police had got him out of our hair. We couldn't catch him, but Merseyside have done it for us." McAteer was incarcerated at HMP Long Lartin in Worcestershire. He immediately began the appeals process. In December 2003, he was refused permission to appeal his murder conviction. In 2006, Mr. Justice Grigson reviewed the case and set McAteer's minimum tariff at 22.5 years. But the story continued outside the prison walls. In 2005, former Glasgow gangster Paul Ferris, who had known McAteer since childhood, published a book titled Vendetta. In it, Ferris made an explosive claim. Ian McAteer was innocent, framed by the police. Ferris alleged that the key witness against McAteer was his own henchman, George Bell Smith. Ferris claimed Smith was a jealous associate who was enraged that his own ex-girlfriend was now in a relationship with McAteer. Ferris's book alleged that Smith provided false testimony in exchange for having a serious charge of child sexual abuse dropped. This claim was, in fact, part of McAteer's failed appeal. Ferris maintained that Selkirk was killed by Irish criminals over unpaid debts. In prison, McAteer, the man who had 2 children, attempted to rebrand himself. By 2011, he was at HMP Shotts in Scotland, where he teamed up with another major Glasgow gangster, Jamie Iceman Stevenson, for a charity event. The 2 men ran a full marathon on a prison treadmill, raising $3,776 for Glasgow's Royal Hospital for sick children. But for the families of his victims, the gesture was a sickening insult. Josephine Bennett, the sister of John Bennett, the man stabbed 57 times, saw the news and called the effort a con for the parole board, stating she would always maintain that McAteer was responsible for her brother's death. The man they called Little Hands and Mad Jock remains in prison, his reputation for quiet, unassuming menace a case study in the contradictions of a violent life. His associate in the cover-up, David Baker, never saw freedom again. He died in his cell at HMP Garth on January 3, 2016, from a splenic artery aneurysm.
The idea of a hitman often brings to mind cinematic, almost mythical figures, but the reality is usually far more mundane. Criminologists at Birmingham City University, led by Professor David Wilson, conducted the first major study of British contract killers. They analyzed decades of cases, building a clear picture of this dark transaction. The researchers found most UK contract killings are not elaborate. They happen in public, on ordinary streets, or in familiar places. The victim is often getting out of a car or walking their dog. The motives are just as boring, not espionage, but business disputes, domestic grudge, or fallouts inside a criminal crew. The study even found an average price, around £15,000. The researchers built a typology of killers from the panicked novice to the dilettante who needs the money. Then there is the journeyman. This is an experienced career criminal who can carry out an execution, but still makes mistakes and gets caught. Finally, there is a rare master, a disciplined specialist who is almost never identified. Psychologically, the study found these killers succeed by burying their feelings. They emotionally detach, treating the target as a business transaction, not a person. This research reframes violence as a marketplace, a service that can be outsourced. The murder of Warren Selkirk fits this framework perfectly. It was not cinematic. It was a cold execution at a public marina, a place Selkirk knew. The motive was a classic fallout, a gambling debt that made him a liability. The execution and the contemptuous message left in his hand showed a chilling emotional detachment. And Ian McAteer, the man who walked free for one murder but was caught for the next, fits the profile. He was not a mythical assassin. He was a journeyman, a feared and vicious criminal, but one who in the end left a trail. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for another story.